for tapping into the Untapped Keg podcast, where we look at different perspectives of sobriety and mental health so that you can take something, implement it into your own life. Here, we think there's only one right way to sobriety. That's the way that works for you. I'm RJ Zimmerman, and I'm excited to be joined by a love and relationship coach for executive women and the host of the Confessions of a Loveaholic podcast, Emmy Hernandez. How are you doing today, Emmy?
Hi, RJ. I'm super excited to be here with you and hang out with your audience.
We're excited to have you. And, when it comes to, we'll get into it, but relationships and just how much there is underneath it, that these lines, again, the paths, the roads, they're so parallel that there's going to be a lot for people to be able to take away that maybe you didn't even realize there was some parallels there. Before we get started, Emmy, could you give us a brief introduction to who Emmy Hernandez is?
Yeah, so I'll give you the brief intro on how I got into this world and what I do now. And it was because I was always the type A, super high achiever, like get perfect grades kind of girl. And I did what society told me to do: get good grades, go to college, get a job, and then I was supposed to be happy forever, right? Well, it turns out that that was a big fat lie. And I did everything that society told me I was supposed to do. And I realized there was no sense of fulfillment after I finished college and after I had the perfect career. I was being flown all over the world, being paid to fly all over the world and teach these super incredible technical details at business universities in Mexico, Uruguay, and Tunisia. And I was like, okay, well, what else is there? I was at the peak of my career and I had gotten really bad toxic relationships. And I realized, okay, so if I really want a partner and I want my love life to be good, like what am I doing? Like what's happening, what's working, what's not working? And there was a lot of pain around that, but it was a lot of very secret pain because women aren't, especially executive women, we're not supposed to talk about being sad or lonely, especially in public places. So I had all this stigma and all this fear and vulnerability around it. And so in secret, I didn't tell any of my friends. In secret, I hired some love coaches. I hired some love coaches and I went through this year-long transformation to learn what it meant to really, truly own my own identity and learn who I was and what I wanted and how I could get into healthy relationships. So after that year-long transformation, it was incredible. It was amazing. And then from there, I started my dating journey. And eventually I met my soulmate, Matt. He's absolutely amazing. He's the love of my life, my rock, my hero, my everything. And we have a beautiful relationship where we co-create everything. Here's how I got into what I do now. The day I announced that Matt and I got engaged, RJ, you wouldn't believe this. I got flooded with all these secret DMs and messages from women saying, how did you meet him? Does he have a brother? Does he have how do we clone him? And I was like, what? Like, I was so confused. And I realized these were all women that I like admired. And I thought their life was like, quote unquote, perfect. And I realized there were so many other women like me that were suffering in silence. And that's how I got into this niche.
What a powerful, powerful story. And the way that you talk about having that quote unquote dirty little secret, right? Just how much that resonates with, I think, a lot of people, because traditionally I didn't have that rock bottom that a lot of people talk about. I didn't have the overt struggles with alcohol that people talk about. Like how I drank was when I would go out and drink, I would drink all of it. And so the last couple of years that I drank, I was blacked out, and it wasn't going to be a part of my life in order to move forward. And the secret of struggling and not being able to share it, and just how much that is in parallel between men and women, and we don't even necessarily recognize it. Because I was actually talking with a friend about this yesterday, and I want your opinion on it. So after, taking in all of this social media content, thinking about my life, thinking about, other people's lives, like my clients and stuff like that, Men are raised to be very competitive. We're raised to be competitive with one another and competitive with our partners too, right? That competition seeps over. Women are raised in more of that cooperative atmosphere, and they work together, and they're taught like that's how the play is and everything. But what both sides don't necessarily realize is there's a different way, and that's collaboration and being collaborative. And so that's where a lot of the headbutting is when the competition meets the cooperation and you think you're working together, but it's really that collaborative spirit that marries both of those things is where you find that magic. And that's something that I think a lot of people would benefit from, especially when it comes to their relationships.
Yeah, I love that you bring this up because it's actually one of my favorite topics to discuss. And so I'm going to say something controversial and then I'm going to explain it. And
Yes.
RJ and I are all about
Yes.
controversy, so we love this. So here's my controversial take and then I'm going to explain it. Your partner, your spouse is not supposed to be your best friend. Do not marry your best friend. Okay. All of society, all of the cards that you're supposed to write, like everything's like, oh, I married my best friend. Let me tell you why you don't want to marry your best friend. Because your best friend, and especially how the male brain designates best friend, is very different from how the female brain designates best friend. Okay. Best friends are supposed to have fun with each other, and men in particular, the way that a very healthy way that men bond with each other is playing pranks.
Yes.
Okay. And it's a healthy way for you guys to bond with each other. That is not how women bond with each other. Playing pranks can be very, 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 very dangerous. Here's where it gets dangerous to have your partner be your best friend. Well, there's also, one of the things that women do is they want to be one of the guys, right? They want to be one of the guys. And then you're in bro territory. And when you're in bro territory, and especially I've heard couples call each other bruh or bro, and I'm like, right? I want to vomit. It's like, don't do that. If you're a romantic partner, that is not your role. Okay. When you are now bros, you remove polarity. And polarity is important for there to continue to be that level of sexual and emotional intimacy. Okay. So guys can play pranks on each other all day long, and that's how you bond, and it's amazing. And one of the biggest mistakes, and there's this big trend on TikTok I've seen in the last 2 years. I don't know why it's gotten so big, but husband playing pranks on their wives. And I can tell you, it seems so he ha ha ha. It is not okay. Let me tell you why. Because the brain cannot designate something that's just for fun versus something that is potentially dangerous. And particularly if a husband plays a prank on the woman, even just to scare her, because it's funny, her brain and her neurological pathways, her nervous system is going to always be on alert and be terrified of that man, even though she's married to him, or other men. And guess what? Women don't need any more help being terrified of men. I'm gonna pause there for a moment.
I mean, yeah. And it's a really interesting thing to bring up because uh so I have two boys who are 6 and 4, and they are already like, "Oh, I'm playing a prank on you," and I'm like, "Guys, that's not a prank. Like, come on, but they think that it is, right?" And you bringing this up just like made it click. Oh yeah, that is what we do to one another when we're just like having fun and being friends and that kind of stuff. And I've seen that in women like my sister, like my mom. I would play pranks on both of them, and how that would get emotions flared and like tempers, and then you wonder why you're not actually playing a prank or something. You accidentally startle somebody, let's say, and they get just super pissed and defensive, and it's like, well, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. And let's be honest about men. Yeah, we need to do better when it comes to creating safe spaces for women, and honestly for other men as well, but we need to do better when it comes to that.
Yeah. And you know what's so powerful is that a man that understands the difference of like being able to be silly and have fun and kind of like rough house with his bros. That's actually a very healthy dynamic. Like anything to do with like sports and whether it's golf and video games is actually very healthy for men to have in their lives. We just need to remember that it can't transfer directly into the romantic side, right? And this is why I say don't have your best, it can't be your best friend. So it's very dangerous for men and women to rely on their partners for best friendship. I'll give you an example. My best friend and I can be on the phone for 4 or 5 hours straight talking about shenanigans. We'll go from like remembering something that happened a decade ago, laughing about that, to then 20 minutes later, something super serious that's going on in our life, maybe going into medical stuff, maybe talking about how like our last appointment at the gynecologist wasn't that amazing, and what happened there, and all of those details, and discussing our menstrual cycle and stuff like that, right? Those are not things that I discuss with my husband. My husband knows when my period happens because he is my number one doctor, and I am spoiled, and he nurtures me back to life. Okay. He loves taking care of me that way. A true healthy masculine man is a nurturer. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. Like healthy masculine men love to nurture their partners, and healthy feminine women love to nurture their partners as well. So, but in order for that to happen, we need to be able to come together in true partnership, as you were discussing earlier. And true partnership is different than competing. And this is one of the things that has happened so much in our society as women have risen into power, which is incredible, absolutely incredible, that we have autonomy over our finances, over our energy, over our body sometimes, because that's not really happening right now with some political
Yeah.
agendas. Right. But what's happening is now there's this confusion of, well, if I have this level of power, then because I've had to fight my way to get into the boardroom, I also have to fight my way to get into the bedroom. And that's not true. It's a completely different skill set and a completely different paradigm for a healthy woman, high value woman, to attract a high value man. And what I mean by that is people who want to be partners. Partners means that you're going to be a team. And this is what I mean. This is what I say to my power couples. Okay, power couples. We know you're both badasses, okay? But you can't both be a leader at the same time in the same room. Just like if you're in a vehicle, okay, driving, you can only have one driver. If you have more than one driver with multiple pedals, somebody's going to die.
Mm, yeah. Wow. That what an incredible analogy to look at. And this would be, I think, a really great time to like dive into how were you able to notice some of the things to work on to get yourself to a place to still be a leader in some areas of life, and then allowing someone else to be the leader, and you allowing allowing yourself to follow sometimes.
Yeah. So I'll start with some of the basics. So there's the context in order to get to this part, right? So in
Mm-hmm.
order for me personally, and then for me to help my clients in this space, is as a woman who has proven that I don't need a man, there's a very special sacred space of wanting to choose and want my man as my companion, and to create space for him to know that he is needed. Okay. This is very important. But in order for me to have gotten to the space that I am in right now, I had to rewire my entire blueprint around love, because I was addicted to pain. Let me repeat this. I was addicted to pain that was masked as love. I grew up with a narcissistic mother, which I didn't realize until a couple of years ago, and an autistic father who is undiagnosed. But because I study this, it's very clear to me now that he follows autism to a T with how it shows up for the male brain. So because of this, especially with the belittling that I experienced with my mother, and you're supposed to love your mom, right? And your mom loves you. So my association with love equaled pain. So pain was familiar to me. And because it was so familiar, that's what I thought love was. And that, my friends, is an addiction. I was addicted to being treated like shit.
Mm. I have goosebumps all over because how many people who have changed how they drink, changed how they, smoke weed, insert this here, could resonate with that, right? Like, what is the reason that underneath you covering everything up with, right? It honestly generally is pain. I want to numb something. And just understanding that the love that you got at that point is how you equated love later in life. And so when you first noticed that cycle of being addicted to pain and you equating pain with love, what were some of the emotions that you went through when you recognized that that's why I kept choosing these people that kind of perpetuated the same cycle?
Yeah. I first had to accept that this was true. I
Mm,
kind of went through the cycles of grief because first,
yeah.
like, I didn't want to believe it. It was like, no, 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 that can't be true. Um, there was a lot of fear that came up, a lot of embarrassment, a lot of like, why did I let this happen? A lot of blame that I wanted to point fingers at mom, dad, everyone in society, and then pointing the finger back at me, which also isn't helpful. So there was a lot of, what's wrong with me? Why am I broken? Why can't somebody just love me? A lot of that fear and the loneliness, humiliation, embarrassment, and then a lot of fucking anger, RJ.
Oh,
Oh man,
yes.
was I pissed. I was pissed for a while with God, for a while with myself, for a while with society, for a while with just everything. And it literally was just everything, including myself. But then I really did get to the point of acceptance. And one of the things that I realized when I was in kindergarten is that you can build up however many blocks you want and you can create a little pattern. But here's the secret: every pattern can be broken. Okay. So once you realize there is a pattern, now as an adult, it doesn't matter what happened to you. And I'm not saying that it doesn't matter because you're not important. It matters what happened to you. But what matters more now is this instant, okay? Holding yourself accountable for now saying, okay, yes, all this shit happened to me and I didn't deserve it. Because you didn't. I promise you, you did not deserve it. I didn't deserve what happened to me. However, I can state right here, right now, that I choose that it ends with me. I choose to break that chain that I've held for generations on my ankle. No more do I have that anchor that follows me around. I am the generational curse breaker. It ends with me. So, because patterns can be broken, I just decided to start a new one. With me, a new lineage starts, a new DNA structure starts. So even though I didn't come from love, love comes from me.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful. And I'm just over here, just cheesing for those who can't see on the audio, right? Because this is where those paths are just they're mirrored when it comes to, and I think an important something important to notice in what you said, right, is acknowledging that cycle and accepting that it's there, accepting that that happened, everything that comes with it, right? The grief cycle that really is going to come with it, that includes that anger. It's going to be coming back at you sometimes. And then being able to understand that, okay, that doesn't define me unless I allow it to, and choosing to do something different. Oh, wow. Wow. That is so powerful. So powerful. And what was the first steps for you in changing the cycle of going from being addicted to pain to really being intentional with who you were choosing and bringing into your life?
Yes. So step number one was regulating my nervous system. And what I mean by that is when you are addicted and you grow up in a toxic household, you are, especially with a narcissist or anyone else who potentially hurt you, your body is always in fight, flight, or fawn. Okay. Fawn is the response where you just say yes to everything, even when someone's hurting you. So sometimes we'll see videos of someone saying something really mean to someone else, another person smiling, and they're like, oh, see, they know it's a joke. No, they're fawning. It's a survival mechanism. Okay. So what happens is the nervous system is always in this tight sort of space, which is what causes panic attacks. So panic attacks are hyperventilation, by the way. People don't understand how they create. It's because we're not breathing properly. We're breathing from like the upper echelon of our body, like basically just in this area, right above our lungs and like barely into our throat. And that's what causes panic attacks. And it's our body's way of shutting down, to numb, to literally pass out, to stop the pain. So panic attacks are also a way of numbing, which is also an addiction. Okay.
Yeah.
We all find our own different ways of figuring out how to reduce pain or minimize it or stop it altogether. And that's one of them. So the number one thing that I had to do, and I have all of my clients do, especially because they're living with anxiety, they're living with all this level of stress, is actually taking very specific type of yoga classes that are called restorative or yin. Yin and restorative yoga are where you sit, and I recommend all these in person. There are YouTube videos, but it's not the same unless you're in a room with other people doing this. Is where you just sit in one pose 5 to 6 minutes. And I don't mean an active pose. I mean like laying down with the blanket over a bolster and your chest completely open. And especially for women, our pelvic area, we are taught to always have our legs closed, 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 closed. But that's where our creativity comes from, our womb area. So for a woman to feel safe in a group with other human beings with her legs open, that is so taboo in society. But in this quiet room with the lights down and you're just sitting and breathing and doing nothing else, you're not checking your phone, you're not talking to a friend, you're not even having a conversation with yourself other than like, what am I doing here? And then you eventually just sort of like let it go. It's step number one is to tell your body, hey, body, I'm safe. We're not about to die. There's no tiger following me. There's no man following me with a gun. I'm not about to be murdered. Because the male brain doesn't have this part. The female brain always has a part of the safety scanning for threats on 24/7. So we are extra exhausted 24/7. The male brain will have that part of the brain highlighted when there's an immediate physical threat, which doesn't happen too often to you guys. They exist, but it's more rare instances. For women, that part of the brain never, ever turns off.
And that is that's really great knowledge, and it really explains a lot. Like when I go for walks at night and people will ask me, well, where'd you go for a walk? And I'll tell them, they're like, weren't you a little bit nervous walking there? And I'm like, no, should I have been? They're like, well, there's not much for lights there. And there's people that, take advantage of that. And I'm like, oh, okay. No, I'm, it's different. It is very different. It's a very different mindset. And I totally understand that. And I understand my privilege being 6'2" and being, somebody who does have big shoulders. And, when you're just not somebody who is going to get messed with very often. And the difference between that and a woman, and how that can do, like, go along with the nervous system. And something else that's there too is when you're always in that fight, flight, fawn, and some people add freeze. When you're in that mode, you don't even realize how tight your muscles are. Like, my shoulders used to be up near my ears, and didn't recognize my breathing. Just now, it's just like, okay, take a moment, deepen your breaths. You don't have to go as deep as you can at first, but just start lengthening out the amount that you're breathing, and then check your shoulders and relax them. Start there, relax your legs a little bit, and just see how your body responds to you. And that is legitimately evidence of your nervous system just relaxing. Oh, This is I love this conversation so far because we're really diving into really useful tips and then giving people the knowledge, that overview of that, and just how much this can really show up. Have you noticed how you show up um in relationships is different with friends as well now compared to what it used to be?
Oh, yes. Um, I used to think that I was a really good friend, and I realized to certain people I was just a good acquaintance, and vice versa, right? So, and honestly, I think I was always a better friend than I ever was a romantic partner. And that's because it was easier to learn how to be friends. Somehow in society, we are taught like this is what it means to be a good friend, and you know, you say please and thank you, and you invite people over and you give gifts and you receive. Somehow there's a little bit more training in that, even in school. But what there's zero training on is what it means to be in a romantic partnership. Because we talk about crushes, but crushes are just, you know, chemical reaction to what the body thinks that another person would be a potential match for procreation. Okay, that's as silly as that sounds. That's all that is, but that's not what makes someone own a really good potential match. There has to be so much more, right? So we talk about chemistry, but there has to be so much more than just chemistry in order for there to be a long-term relationship that works. And with friendships, they get a version of me. So I have different identities. This is one of the things where I help my clients with. I have different identities that show up with different people. The version of me that shows up with my friends is Emmy the nurturer, Emmy the supporter, Emmy the cheerleader. I'm a really good cheerleader to my friends, but they will never meet Emmy the lover.
Mm-hmm.
Emmy the lover is designated, Emmy the Aphrodite is designated just for my husband. Emmy the Aphrodite is, she only shows up behind closed doors in private with my man. Okay. So does Emmy Shenanigans. Emmy Shenanigans shows up when my husband and I are in a playful mode, and it has nothing to do with sex. It's just creating intimacy by doing something silly. I'll give you an example of something silly that I do pretty consistently, but I come up with different ideas. Yesterday, I knew I wanted to make dinner for my husband, and we each decide when we're gonna do dinner at different times. So it's never an obligation, right? He's always so happy when I make dinner, and I always offer when I have the time. And yesterday I knew I had the time, and I knew that he had asked for nachos if I had time. So before he got home, I made a little menu, like on a little post-it note, and I said, "Welcome to Emmy's kitchen. Here's a menu for tonight. We're gonna have nachos a la mode or whatever." I just made a random crap. And then option number 2 was beef with mashed potatoes and something else, right? And the whole thing was just ridiculous. It was meant to be like he came into this fancy restaurant, which we have a fancy home, but he wasn't showing up to a restaurant. So he saw that and he laughed so hard, right? But that was me going into shenanigans mode. Here's the thing. I have to choose to go into that mode. So does he. So we have this rule. This is gonna, for those of you who are in partnership right now or planning to get into partnership, hear me out, write this down. Okay. The identity that you show up with is the energy that you will be matched with. The identity that you show up with is the energy you'll be matched with. Let me explain. When I'm in my office and that door is closed like it is right now, my husband knows I am not in shenanigans mode. I am not in playful mode. I'm in coaching mode. I'm in work mode. So if that door were to be opened right now, he would not be matched with a nice encounter. Okay. He also has his role that before he comes home, before he unlocks that door to our sacred home, he does a spiritual costume change. Whatever happened at work happened at work. But when he opens that door and I open my door and we don't meet with, today was horrible. How shitty was your day? Mine was super shit, blah, blah, blah. Like, do we have shitty days? Yes. But we choose, when he comes home, he's my lover and I'm his lover. And we choose to meet and encounter with an embrace always, to have that reconnection no matter what. No matter what, we are coming together in partnership as a reset. And then we can discuss what happened in our days after that, but not before. So he's not allowed to come home and be a jerk to me, and I'm not allowed to be a bitch to him, because that would be our default. Our defaults are always to complain. Our ego is always looking for what's wrong. So it's easy to complain about what's wrong, but we have a rule that we bring goodness first and address other situations after.
Mm. And that's a part of choosing what it is that you want to see, right? What it is that who you want to be. Like choosing, this is who I was, doesn't mean that's who I have to be, but I have to actually, that doesn't mean I just look and stare at the horizon. I'm going to walk towards it. Like you actually have to take the steps and walk towards that horizon that you want to work towards. And that's really, that's the messy part. That's the part that can get difficult, but it's also the part that leads to the dividends, like you were talking about, where all of a sudden you have this life that you're co-creating with somebody, this life that honestly you're co-creating with yourself. You're not just putting yourself on autopilot and just going through life basically on a whim. Like you're actually able to create that and then co-create with somebody else, and that's really special, and um something to really work towards for sure. What would you say was the most difficult cycle to break when you got into the healthy dynamic that you're in?
Ooh, I'm going to get real vulnerable here, where I think a lot of people will appreciate this. The most difficult cycle for me to break was to stop emasculating men.
Okay.
As strong, powerful women, our only tool to protect ourselves was to emasculate and to be mean to you guys and to reduce your manhood. It started off that way. It started as a way to sort of compete. And what's sad is that right now in our society, it's actually how most men and women flirt when they first meet, is actually take little jabs at each other.
Yeah.
And we call it sass, but I call it toxicity because there are other ways of flirting that don't minimize the other. And for me, I grew up in a household where my mom pretty much wore the pants, and my dad's a very strong masculine man, but in order to not create any conflict, because my mom is so aggressive, he just kind of let her have her way. And he became very submissive to her. So I thought that's what relationships were like. So I made it, my tongue was sharp, sharp and sarcastic and rude and cruel, but I got away with it because I'm cute. But what happens is when you start a relationship based on minimizing the other, it only magnifies that later on. It doesn't get better. So I had to really, really work on myself of like, okay, what do I really want and need here? And how do I say my needs in a way that doesn't minimize my partner? So that's not, I will say around 70% of the women that I work with, that's a huge thing that we have to work on, for them understanding to request their needs in a non-passive aggressive way, in a non-petty way, in a non-bitchy way, in a non-emasculating way. And I got to tell you, is it work? It's so much work, but it's worth it. And once you get good at it, it becomes autopilot. My husband and I do not communicate with each other sarcastically. Can we be sarcastic? Absolutely. But we use sarcasm for other people. For us, it's not allowed in our relationship. We are playful and we tease each other, but sarcasm has no place in our relationship. And we're also not mean to each other. And we quickly address something. If we accidentally say something mean, my husband will be quick to call me out. And this happens he'll say, that wasn't nice. Like it's a quick sort of redirection, right? And then if he says something on accident, I'm like, oh, that hurt my heart a little bit. And it's a quick, so we have the level of respect for each other, where if we do accidentally cross some boundaries, we call it out in a way that it's a pattern interrupt, and then we go address and be like, oh, sorry, That was not my intention. I did not mean that. Sorry, honey. Right? And a quick sort of resolution so that we can move on, and we address the hurts quickly so that the wound can close and for it to heal, because most couples just ignore the wounds and hoping that eventually they're going to solder themselves. Sorry, you have to become a surgeon. You actually have to heal that. They're not going away just because you ignore them.
And so with men, what do you typically see on the other side that they have to work on? Like, because it's not just one person showing up in the relationship and changing communication styles. You have to have somebody who can match that on the other side, but it's going to look a little bit different. And do you have any insights into that?
Yes. So on the men's side, what I see and what I hope my clients see is understanding that if you want a true partnership and you want a woman who's actually going to be by your side, who's a nurturer, but also a badass, who's going to co-create this life with you, is that she, especially the more of a badass she is at work, the more comfort she needs at home. Okay. So the more you can like stand strong and love on her and touch her gently on her arm, on her hand, come close and put her forehead towards yours and allow her to breathe. She needs that space of safety. Okay. Every single woman needs a space for safety. And if you can be sort of like that rock for her when she's going into chaos and oh my God, and overwhelm, because women, we go into overwhelm a lot faster than men because of how our brains operate. Okay. So you guys might think something was so minimal, but for us, it was a big deal. Tip number one, gentlemen, if your wife, your partner, your spouse ever starts crying, don't you ever dare tell her, please stop crying. I know you have good intentions, but it's going to hurt us more. So the best thing you can do is literally just be with us, hold us tight, and she'll be able to talk to you once she has a full release. Like she has to have this full experience of sobbing to be able to release that. And it is healthy. Okay. It is healthy for a woman to have these releases once every 30 to 60 days. As I know it sounds silly, but for women, that is necessary, is a necessary part of breathing and as participating in the world as a human experience. Another thing is that I hear a complaint from a lot of women is men not understanding the emotional, physical, and psychological load of household chores. Okay. Men, we hear you guys complaining, well, I don't want a mom. Stop acting like a child then. Okay. So what does it mean to act like a child? When you don't take care of your own laundry, when you don't do your own dishes, when you don't do any of the cooking or the cleaning or any of the household, like mental and psychological, like living situation, that by default will fall onto her. And if all you can say is, well, she just needs to give me a list and I'll do it. Yeah. Okay. Since when do you want to be delegated to? Do you want her to be your boss? Because only people who are submissive in the hierarchy are the ones who are delegated to. So don't you dare put yourself in that position. I want you to co-create, have meetings, okay, about how you're going to either take care of chores. And hey, I get it. I don't like doing the dishes. My husband doesn't, he's much better at doing the dishes than I am. My husband hates cooking. I really love cooking when I have time. Gentlemen, it is no one's obligation to feed you. You are a grown-ass man. Figure it out. Okay? This is a big, big, big deal. And it's the number one reason divorces happen when men don't understand that they're not living with their mommies anymore. Okay? And here's the thing. Here's the best part is that if you build your empire to such an incredible space, neither one of you has to do any of the chores. You get to hire it out, baby. You get to hire out the laundry. You get to hire out the dishes. You get to hire out all of that. And that is really a space where I want my power couples to get to. But so often the the woman's responsibilities is, take care of the kids and take care of the house. On top of that, running a business or having a full-time job. And gentlemen, I can tell you that is like having 5 full-time jobs, and it is not fair. So it's not, it doesn't all fall on you. Okay. This is a system of patriarchy. However, if you can have conversations with your wife around how you can both equally take the share of the load, and on top of that, give her do nothing days. So if you have kids, take them for a full day with her permission, like she knows this is happening, so she can sleep, she can read, she can do whatever she wants, of doing nothing. Nothingness is such a key to happiness for the female mind, brain, spirit, and her body regulation.
So that is really great advice, and something that I do want to say is, men, it is very helpful to cry yourselves. So if you're uncomfortable crying in front of somebody, it's okay to cry. There's nothing wrong with that. And so when somebody else is crying, it's human, and you can cry too. There is nothing wrong with crying. Um, that's a lesson that I had to learn after, probably like I was probably 35 when I really started to actually cry. And so that's something that I understand, the being uncomfortable somebody else is crying, and then also validating their need to cry and all of that. And then the other side is, a great way to really open up on how to get the household stuff done is just ask, hey, what do you enjoy doing any of this? Right? What is it that you don't mind doing? Oh, I don't mind doing the one that you hate doing. I'm glad that just like you were saying with your husband and the dishes and then the cooking kind of a thing. Okay, but you're not going to cook all the time. It's the same thing. Like, it's somebody's going to have to pick up the slack. And sometimes you have to see that the slack needs to be picked up and not just have your head down and doing what it is that you want to do. And that's something that I think is, really having your head and your eyes open to be able to notice, um, when the other person could just use that break, and then taking that and turning it into yourself too, and noticing when you need a break, and then giving yourself that permission to have that break and figure out an opportunity to have that happen. And, um, everything that you said there too, with like the communication, all of that, a lot of that you can turn and use on yourself. Like, that's these conversations that we talk about in the relationships, all of that, like we can use that for ourselves and see what works and what doesn't. And it's really useful, and it's gets to that, what's underneath this, like being addicted to pain, numbing those feelings, all of those, um, underlying reasons for why you want to be healthier in your life. This is all so useful. Um, God, what an action-packed episode. Emmy, if people want to follow you, what's the best way they can do that?
Yes, they can find me on all of my socials. I'm a Love Coach Emmy. And the easiest website to find me on is emmyhernandez.com. You can send me an email there, contact, and my team will reach out to me.
And you can check that out in the show notes as well. Emmy, this has been a blast. And if you could leave everybody with, one piece of advice in opening up and seeing their true cycles, well, what do you think that would be?
First thing is that you're not broken.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
You are not your patterns. So we don't need to fix you, but we do need to address your patterns and your blueprints. And that you deserve safe love. The day that you decide that you desire and you are worthy of safe love, the universe will match any and all of your desires.
Mm, that's powerful. That's so great. Thank you so much for being here, Emmy. This was a fantastic episode. For all those who are listening or watching, share this with somebody who would benefit from this episode, because this one is really powerful and has a lot of really useful tools and skills that you can start with to develop. And let's try to be better tomorrow than we were today, because at least if we don't make it, we tried. Take care, everybody. I love you.